Welcome to Rubicon, the new stomping ground for the augmented human C4621. C4. Through name and action, I suppose it would only be fitting to embody the bomb. Having never played an Armored Core game, even this one, before, can you beat it with only explosives? My literal first steps in the game went a little something like this, clearly with great control over the situation. And to the veterans of the series, I'm sorry for what I'm about to do. Now, while the game feels like tutorializing a whole heck of a lot, I've got places to be and limits to my ammo, so I wasn't even remotely interested in engaging in combat. What's the worst that could happen? My first combat experience being a boss encounter? I got into what they called a catapult, and on the one hand, I have to wonder how the hell any humanoid could survive the G-forces involved in this. On the other hand, this is stupidly cool, and I'm okay with shutting up. The game has me going place to place trying to pick up a license to do merc work, which costed some health, but I wasn't too concerned. Oh, will you look at that? A boss! And me still learning the controls. Well, no time like the present, and I don't intend to mince words. This game's controls feel clunky. It feels slow. Frankly, a bit wrong at first. But I do want to emphasize at first. I'm slow on the uptake, and it's really hard to explain, but if you give yourself the time to really feel out the controls, I don't know. I think this game is something special. Heck, if nothing else, you can pause it, which is a godsend in this kind of game. Need to take a moment to breathe? Got you covered. I spent a little bit learning how to maneuver and what all this reticle nonsense meant, and as much HUD as it is, it's really nice when you finally get a feel for it, giving you everything that you need in one convenient spot and gives you audio readouts for things that aren't as visible. I wish more games were as clear-cut in how they communicate with the player. Now, as for the boss, I wasn't doing all that well. I did my best to land every rocket I could into the thing, which took some learning as for the timing of lock-on, as indicated by the yellow bar in the center of the reticle. You can stagger enemies, sort of like Sekiro, as indicated by the yellow bar at the top of the screen. You can do a lot more damage to staggered enemies, which works great if you can hit more frequently, but the starting AC just doesn't have enough ammo. I've only got my right shoulder weapon, so it's able to recover too quickly, and I just do too little. To cut it really short and dry, no, you can't beat the game with most things because tutorial. I managed to get it to about half health, hitting almost all of my missiles, even getting a stagger in, but there's just no way around it. But what if we just casually ignore the starting mission? What about the rest of the game? Well, I blew through this fight on my first try that allowed the use of my primary gun and sword. Took just over a minute and a half. Sword OP, please buff. Anyways, my new name here is simply Raven. A stolen title, and one that I take into the next mission where I'm tasked with blowing up some artillery. Some enemies have shields that make damaging them in certain spots more difficult. So while this mission was really easy, it was a valuable lesson early on. One that I'm really grateful to have picked up via the patron saintess of this run, Arachne. She's an armored Corvette, which is probably an understatement, especially with Armored Core FA, but also she's a lovely member of the community, and the only reason I noticed. I was kind of absent-mindedly throwing missiles into shields because I'm not observant. She was also a fantastic guide to the beginning and end of the game. You'll notice that my build basically doesn't change at all during the mid portion, outside of weapons, because I don't know what I'm doing. Mechs are complicated, okay? You can replay missions freely though, which is exactly what I did to earn the funds required to pick up some new parts. In some missions you get paid per kill, which works out great for filling out my kit. Which, by the way, already includes the literal best FCS in the game for what I'm doing. In other words, most missile lock-ons are almost instant. I'm being paid by one corporation to hunt a squad of units from a different corporation. So anyway, I started blasting. I've got twin homing missile pods, I've got twin bazookas. They fire slow, but they hit hard. When they hit, they're not ideal for rooms like this, but they'll see their place to shine. Oh, they'll shine like shrapnel. We do a lot of swapping sides to basically whoever will pay, such is the life of a merc. Honestly, you can pretty comfortably go through the game ignoring the general story. There is something really satisfying about showing up, blowing up something big, and flying away. I did take some extra time in each mission that had one to hunt after combat logs. They're useful for getting some unlocks, but I can't honestly recall if the unlocks were ever helpful. They were a little out of the way, but they were also a lot more fun in terms of collectibles than I'm used to. Your collectibles require some minor murder. Afterwards, I transported some transport helicopters to hell where they belong! Of course, everything that came before was merely learning to walk. Now we learn to walk faster. This mission gives the first taste of real AC combat. They're faster than most enemies, they dodge more, they do more damage. Luckily, the one that I'm after is being piloted by a tester rather than someone who knows what they're doing. And to the poor bastard who got stuck with this job, I've got only one thing to say. Parry this, you filthy casual. Next up was working with the Red Guns, basically just another group of mercs working for the company Balaam. For the general personality among them, imagine stereotypical veterans that delight in hazing. You know, douchebags. They more or less muck about while I went around one-shotting the targets via bazooka booms. Next up, though, was something considerably bigger. in the literal sense. This game's got scale, and this mission isn't even remotely hard, but it's really cool. First, you just gotta bust up a leg, climb on up, hop around destroying vents, and then play peekaboo with a really aggressive eye. It's technically a boss, but it's so easy to avoid anything dangerous. The worst part is what it does to my frame rate sometimes. Naturally, though, this would result in the whole thing coming down in a glorious fashion. Outdated reference about what certain groups do before walking away. I then had contact with some loser named Snail, and he's dreadful. He insists that I wouldn't be of any help, then immediately turns around and asks me to come help with some big operation. We've got to attack some big wall where they need to attack the top. But we've got flying machines, you silly! Oh, and they've got guns. They've got a lot of guns. I found that getting up close and personal, while not safe, was incredibly effective. You can take the wall turrets out in genuine comfort, picking them off one shot at a time before taking on anything that they defended. Further on, there's a resupply for all of my ammo and health needs. Handy that. Making my way through the place, I was introduced to a guy named Rusty. He seems nice enough. The game plays him up to be something like your rival and an all-around badass. He's here to help with the boss fight, as it takes rounds to the front like a champ. I refuse to have him helping count against me, though, because I ain't controlling the bugger. And also, he abandons you halfway through to go deal with some other things. The boss turns slowly, but unfortunately for me, my rockets are even slower. Aside from being held in place by both my hand weapons, their travel speed is terrible. So I favored trying to just get above its shield and get behind it when I could manage. It wasn't the most successful, but I did have plenty of ammo in the long run. And down it went. Easy boss. Also, Rusty was kind enough to let me know that my role was to die in the stead of their good pilots. But then, I took the wall that they struggled with. Somehow. Meaning I'm not sure why they couldn't get in themselves. How few pilots do they have, and or how badly do they suck? I stopped in to complete a couple of specific trainings for new gear. Both were incredibly easy, as they have you using explosives to get explosives. For my efforts, I got a slow but really hard-hitting grenade launcher and a vertical missile pod. And, vertical missile launchers aren't good. They're so slow that most of the shots will miss anything that doesn't hold incredibly still. They do great damage, so when that's a thing, nothing is better, but damn, these things suck against ACs. And LCs. Possibly even ABCs. Back to real work, I was tasked with gathering some combat data, and the mission variety of this game is strange. The section is timed. One of maybe 2 or so timed sections. Just like there's a total of 2 defense missions in the base game. 1 stealth mission. It's mostly just shooting things, but it has some little side events that feel almost like the era of games that the series comes from. Anyways, I took the time to do an optional AC fight. I tend to only be okay at focusing on one thing at a time, though, so you're probably seeing just what I mean when I say that the vertical missiles suck. I didn't really, until way later. I was perfectly content just blasting away until either I ran out of ammo, or she would finally die tonight, sanctified with dynamite. As a result, I cut the mission a bit closer than I should have. Afterwards, I unlocked the arena. To put it simply, it's a one-on-one fight between you and another armored core. For beating them, you get a limited currency that you can only get here, which you can spend on minor upgrades to your mech. Things like improving your healing, increasing your damage resistance, and whatnot. Firing explosives straight down often works a treat, and my current legs allow me to hover at next to no cost to my energy. This wouldn't always be my strategy, but damn, rockets go boom. My handler Walter gives me the least helpful advice I've ever heard in my life, and after actively harming the Liberation Group by taking their wall, they're hiring me to go help them. There really is no concept of loyalty in this game. Everyone is totally chill with Raven just waltzing around blowing up their stuff as long as they can be hired after. There are some enemies that can become invisible, and I'm fairly sure teleport around. They're obnoxious, but at least stationary enough. I didn't get by in the cleanest fashion, but they weren't that different in the grand scheme of things. Now this is the mission where things get fun. To anyone who's played it, you probably know why. Now, there's some portions of this that I think are meant to be done in a stealthy fashion, but I didn't. Do you know how hard it is to sneak in a mech this big? I bled resources rather quickly, but I brute forced my way through a lot of mobs, all to find what I think is the first time an AC fight starts to really feel like a fight. He's quick, does a lot of damage, and can even repair himself a bit. Luckily, checkpoints are a thing, and restarting from them restores all of your stuff. While the combats before you could more or less burst down, this one goes a bit longer. It's an endurance match, whether you like it or not. Or maybe it's just because of the vertical missiles and slow launchers. Or because I'm bad. After getting a lot of lucky shots, I managed to survive long enough to beat him, and looking back, there really was a nice difficulty curve with those fights throughout, but I do mean those fights. I destroyed a device that neither of us understood, got what should have been a lethal dose of death poisoning, and I started hearing a voice in my head. Immediately after, we get to see this big fella. And I gotta ask, where the hell do I get me one of those? That setup is everything I aspire to have in an explosive array. Now, if this is somehow the first time you're seeing Balteus, it's not quick, but my health bar is when in contact with this thing. Despite having access to an endless supply of explosives though, it commits a grand heresy. It abandons the way of the boom to swing some stupid sword around. How foolish. And also, dang, this thing is a step up. Generally speaking, I found that it was best to try to maneuver through the giant storm of missiles, though it took some learning. Hell, this whole fight was a lesson and a half. When I say that this is the mission where things got fun though, I meant it. Genuinely, this is where things started to click for me. This fight kicked me around with no pity, no hesitation. I think it's super learnable though. It doesn't start pulling out its sword attacks until it gets to around half health. It telegraphs its big shock AoE pretty well, and you get a stagger whenever you break its shield. At first I tried to use my missiles to stagger it, my grenade launchers to capitalize on the increased damage I could deal during, but that wasn't right. I was regularly dying with plenty of ammo, and I don't think it made the fight any faster, but what was I rushing for? No, I needed to make this endurance match favor me instead. I had to learn to dodge the best that I could, recognize when it was going to sit still long enough to nail it at any opportunity. Stagger or no, I was firing my grenades because a stagger means a moment where I'm not getting shot at. It wasn't clean, it wasn't fast, and I'm not convinced I could do it consistently, but I learned the fight. As I did, I learned the game itself. It became less about thinking and more about doing. Moving with the ebb and flow, even as badly as I still performed it. This fight was the moment that I was sure this game absolutely isn't for everyone. It's hard, fast-paced, and I'm sure the camera alone is enough to make it inaccessible for a lot of people, but this game is something special. For those that can get into it, I think it's a really great experience, and I'm gonna blow the whole damn thing up. Speaking of though, the giant explosion of coral that nearly killed me is apparently headed toward the other coral. And if you don't know what that is, it's a lot of things. For all intents and purposes, think of it as a MacGuffin. The thing that we fight and die over because energy demands and whatnot. I picked up some new gear, beat up some more AI in the arena, and ignored a direct order to rest to instead go try out my new toys. All my weapons are now homing missiles, and I was thrilled. What's my plan? Blow stuff up, that's my plan. Bolt Hunter, get to Sawtooth Cauldron. Wait, no, ignore that last part. Force of habit, just blow stuff up. This area is under the control of a woman named Carla, and a woman after my black powder heart. I appreciate the addition. I really do. But if there's one thing I haven't forgotten this run, she then tries to kill me via an entirely grounded unit, and my floaty legs were an incredible accidental counter. That's all I can really say about this boss. It was like being threatened with a knife, but the one holding the knife was a mouse. It's kind of scary, but not really. More confusing than anything else. Probably could be a lot harder on a different run, but moving on. After wrecking her house, Carla has had a change of heart. She's willing to help as long as I clear out these bunch of dudes. You might think I'd get sick of this mission objective being to just kill things, but no. I'm here to blow things up, and for the first time in a long time, I'd even suggest trying this run. It's a lot of fun. What I don't get is how Carla figures I owe her after her letting me through her territory after I smashed my way through it fair and square. Not like she really had a say in it. And then I even destroyed things attacking her. Really, I think this has been a one-sided working relationship, and not in my favor. There were a ton of sky lasers, and I went with the age-old strategy of getting shot to get through. It worked pretty well, but I think avoiding getting shot worked even better. But only a little. Turns out I'm also taking out some of Carla's enemies along here, and paying for the privilege. How do I owe you anything? Well, to make matters even better, I was attacked by a giant spider. Because of course. Can't have anything nice. Well, there's only one way through this, and that's by busting the damn thing. I found that being in the air was as healthy for me as it was for a fish. It didn't kill me immediately, but the consequences I faced for staying there were dire. And I will join the choir of people saying that no, this is not a Souls-like. Among other things, you don't have iframes on your dodges. They're for repositioning. That being said, this fight almost instantly became easier as soon as I started thinking about it like a Souls boss. It's too fast and aggressive for me to space effectively, so why try? If I don't have the energy to sit above it, and I can't go back nor to the sides, it really only leaves me with forward. Moving under and through its legs works a treat. Not perfectly, mind you, but I never claimed to be. The rest of its attacks are relatively easy to avoid with the lessons you would hopefully have already learned. Turns out bombs make great melee ranged weapons in this specifically, but even mitigating just that much more gave me the survivability that I needed to make it into phase 2, where it goes airborne and punishes you for being on the ground. And I can fly. Accidental counters are always neat. Afterwards, I sat in a tin can on top of a sled that is built to shoot you across the planet by the power of rockets, and I am well past caring about how realistic this is. Every part of this has circled so deeply into stupid that it's come all the way back around to rad as hell. Even the tin can is powered by rockets. I smashed up some virtual bots and I'm off to do some data gathering, and can we take a moment to appreciate just how pretty this game is? I only noticed it after the fact, but the color palette for this game is generally pretty one note. The graphics aren't super technically impressive, but I love the look of FromSoft games. There's something about the art style that just doesn't look like it's going for realism, but also looks fairly realistic. It's done in such a way that it ages really nicely, and I just don't think their visual design team gets enough praise. As always, you folks are doing fantastic work. Pretty much every mission's map was a visual treat, and I know I'm gushing, but like, come on! Funny enough, this place did pose a little bit of an issue. I'm here destroying corporate goons when the PCA shows up. Basically professional fun killers. Something about ceasing blowing things up immediately or whatnot. I wasn't really listening. Now, prior to coming here, I swapped my legs out for some reverse joint ones that allow me to jump good. Unfortunately for me though, these enemies are great at either blocking or avoiding missiles altogether. And I can't be bothered to go through the process of swapping out my weapons. You can do so when you die on bosses, so you probably can on normal checkpoints too, but if there's one thing my kit does, it's brute force. So brute force I would apply to the problem, and it worked. Never said that these tools were meant for the thinking crowd. I had plenty of ammo to blow up their ship too. You more or less just have to break one major part that they left on the outside. Easy. I bet I could take on a whole fleet of these things. On second thought, I'm kind of tired. Maybe we could take a rain check so I can take a nap a few thousand miles in any direction that's not this one. Rusty has me going after fuel supplies for the fleet, as the major corps all have one massive common enemy with control of the planet. It's like setting bombs off with bombs. Till I got a double boss. Kind of. They don't have the health to pose a real threat. They're hardly worth the fuse, but heck. I had a blast. Next up was an assassination mission, which has you using an AC. I understand why from a gameplay perspective, but why not attack the guy when he's not in a probably billion-dollar war machine? To make matters better, this is a mandatory stealth section. If you're spotted, you fail. No ifs, ands, or buts, except mine getting through here by sneaking in the only way that I know how, by using rocket stealth. What is rocket stealth? Well, if nobody is alive to see you, then for legal purposes, they can't prove that you were here in the first place, so you pelt them with rockets. Easy. Anyways, when I caught up to my target, he turned out to be a little more than some condescending ass who really didn't even put up much of a fight. The worst part is that he's a coward, so after trying to belittle me at every turn, he had the audacity to try bargaining for his life. Well, bud, let me introduce you to my negotiators. They don't take too kindly to bribes! I also replayed the mission and took the bribe because I wanted the other combat log. It was fine. You get a different boss battle, and he's plenty easy enough. A bit harder, but both were comfortable first tries. This one did manage to take 2 repairs instead of none though, so credit where it's due. While sabotaging some PCA equipment, I blew up a lot of stuff. On accident this time. I know how that sounds. You know, I gave myself another lethal dose of MacGuffin. Not sure why this one was more survivable than the last, but I'll take it. I corrupted some data in glorious fashion, flew in a low visibility zone, which I wouldn't recommend in the general sense. Whether you're piloting a mech or just a standard vehicle, go slow and steady if you have to go. Rushing a little bit might get you there a bit quicker, and it might mean you never make it at all. It's not worth risking your life or the lives of those around you. Be safe on the roads, and if you can't see, just pull over. Also, I got a repeat of the helicopter fight. This time was personal, so bodying it was not only mandatory, but a treat. It has flares this time to shrug off homing missiles, but it's no match for my ammo reserves. Missing ain't an issue for a weapon with miss in the name. So Carla's back in the picture, the leader of a group called RAD. Literally rad. And her current plan speaks to me on a spiritual level. This is a defense mission. It plays kind of exactly how you'd expect. My own lack of skill aside though, I was able to easily bounce around the area, taking out all that came our way. I didn't even lose one of the missiles, and we may have had our differences, but you know, Carla, you're alright. Next up was a boss fight. With slow tracking missiles, it can be hard to hit some things, like this thing has a weak spot between its treads, which was incredibly easy to hit for some reason, and it took astronomical amounts of damage for everything that I did. I don't know if I can really stress enough just how easy this thing was to bring down, so no healing first try? I expected at least something more than that. Next up was a mission that would have been okay, except I wanted to complete optional objectives, which left me low on ammo and near death. very near death. The fights I had to go through to get here were relatively doable, but long and tedious. Mostly just all of my attacks being nullified, so at risk of doing them again, I carefully went through every bit and piece of the following sections in an almost surgical fashion. I was sitting on one hit from death for far too long, but with some incredibly delicate use of cover, I managed to push through to a double boss fight featuring Rusty for support. He seemed to target whichever one I wasn't, so I tried to switch around in an effort to focus one down with him in spite of his efforts, because he also abandons you again. Can't be bothered to stick with you through a single conflict. Made it in the end, though, with plenty of health to spare even. And then there was a giant worm robot underground that I needed to survive long enough for the mission to end, and they're not the most novel of enemies. Not super complicated, but I don't know. This game's just really cool. Even the worms are imposing. Like, how would you feel with that thing staring at you? Until it left to go toward where the corals all come together. I caved in even more virtual mechs and went hunting a slightly less virtual one. Is it weird that the arena missions are me controlling a person controlling a simulation of a mech that they're controlling? How many levels of disconnect can we pile on before it gets wacky? Anyways, outside of some really cool spectacles, this mission only really has an AC boss fight to contend with, and one that I already stomped out earlier, so while the fire effects are really cool, this fight was super easy. Nothing too terribly hard to avoid, and I was able to recover some experimental tech. I showed up to the site of the big battle to find it already over. Apparently the owner of the license I stole is here, and they're wanting to see if I'm deserving of the name Raven. A title passed down by different pilots is a symbol of the will to choose. A freedom and resolve carried by the Raven's wings. But the previous pilot just didn't quite seem to know yet how to soar. After it came time to put up or shut up, it'd be me, several compatriots, and a giant worm. I'd been tasked with using an explosive harpoon to break its primary shield. It's an electric explosion, but a rose by any other name would detonate just as hard. That being said, actually aiming this thing proved difficult. You can't charge it, but there's quite a delay between pressing the button and it firing. Afterwards, Rusty is firing a giant gun to break its secondary shield. Then we all lay into its face. Simple. It took some warning to hit the right timing to blast it, but I eventually got it down, and I was able to cycle through phases with relative ease. Everybody on the front line eventually fled like a bunch of cowards, and it was just me against the worm with Rusty behind me. Way behind me. Rusty fires one last shot, and to put it simply, this is a DPS check. One that missiles just weren't enough to deal with. I swapped from all missiles to one shoulder missile and twin incendiary grenade launchers, and this couldn't have gone much more smoothly. These things shred the ice worm's health, and you gotta love things that go boom. The voice in my head is upset by these events, as the coral that was fueling the thing is essentially people, and also energy, and data storage. And while it's the most powerful thing within human tech at the moment, it also burned planets and across space itself, which is a problem. It's complicated. The PCA was stomped out, and their assets were picked up by the Archivist group, so they're large and in charge. One by one, some of the top tier ACs would fall in the arena, and then I would fall in not the arena. Really, this section is basically just falling, so I would recommend using the floor for cover best you can. Plenty easy. They had me exploring deeper into a place, looking for the coral that we're all here for. Punctuated nicely by this fella here.
What makes you so special, freelancer?
If you must know what makes me so special between the two of us, then, well, I'm still alive. He wouldn't be the only boss here, though. There was also a big ol' bot. It's really easy to stun, and despite having a forward-facing shield, it lowers it regularly. As a result, its best defense just doesn't come into play much here. It's not fast enough to avoid things like most ACs do. It does become a lot more dangerous at close range, even sporting some command grab style things going on. But I have one time per attempt one-shot protection, which managed to prevent the most dangerous thing it has, and with some relatively careful play, I was able to get through in at least relative comfort on my first attempt. See you around, you hunk of junk. Damn, this game is pretty. Anyways, this thing. Another boss fight, but this one was on a time limit. And that's not to beat the boss, that's to beat it and get out of here. Don't let it stress you out too much, though. While I found the controls a lot less so, I found the game as a whole to be a lot more forgiving. And when you do manage to get a feel on it, things just start to feel stylish rather than hard. I still wouldn't say it's exactly easy, but I'd very much like to stress that it's really fun. I got the last arena missions available in the game, which meant I'd be just a bit stronger. And you may be wondering why I keep bringing them up, and it's simple. With these last few done and dusted, that marks perfection. I beat every arena mission in the game on my first attempt. Felt pretty good. Now, in the middle of everything, I was sent on a little bit of an assassination mission, and I remembered killing them, but I didn't remember the fight at all, outside of the fact that I finally had a major ally stay with me through the whole thing for the first time. You end up killing a lot of important characters through this game, and it's strange, not necessarily unwelcome, but quite strange. And finally, on this long outing, it would come time for rival versus rival. Rusty was sent here to kill me, and reluctantly, he'd comply.
Rubicon still needs me. So, buddy, who needs you?
Well, that's the thing. Nobody does. Like the raven's feathers, soft and delicate, the lining of a bomb is only strong enough to try its best, to hold together as long as it can before going off. It's the only thing between the world and the flames within. When it cracks, nobody will wonder where it's gone. Nobody will remember the raven's feather. Some will be engulfed by the hellfire that's let loose, but when the smoke clears, the thing that they won't forget is the craters that are left behind. The thing is, my rockets don't have much trouble keeping up with you, but I see you're just not fast enough to keep up with me. I'll see you soon, buddy. Underneath it all, though, was the city we were after, where the coral was headed and where I had to go. I cut through some pilots like a block of C4 through wet paper, and next up was a gorgeous spectacle of a fight. One that I didn't get to see much of. My homing missile shredded through its health, and while I didn't keep it up as smoothly as I could have, I only took a few hits during its first phase. Maybe I'd feel differently if I had spent longer with it, but I thought that it was really cool. It's gorgeous, and just fast enough to be really imposing without being unmanageable. It does borrow a few notes from a different boss that I'm not nearly as fond of, but I'm quite the fan. It feels like a dance between you and it, trading attacks and dodges to a song with no notes, a symphony of sounds that only the heart can hear. I quite enjoyed it. Only to be interrupted by Snail. Damn cutscenes, making me weaker for plot reasons. Rusty's crew is now in control of the planet, my handler has been compromised, and he's informed me that his goal is to burn the coral. A barbaric means to an end, but by letting it grow unhindered, it risks both it and us. There isn't much of a choice here. Either way, all I've got is this hunk of junk with a bazooka, a few friends, and a dream. Luckily, one of those things has come to rescue me, and we're off to do another defense mission. I've got some new missile launchers that, get this, launch missiles. Once we're done hacking into the city systems, we pull it up out of the water because this whole thing is actually a giant flying craft, and you may be able to guess, but this ain't just a means of transit. You're looking at the second biggest bomb in the game, with one purpose, which is to set off the biggest. And as cruel as it is to do, let's face it, there is no way more fitting for this to end. The voice in my head is quite understandably against it, as she is Coral. Her family and her friends are Coral, and despite her pleading, in this case, I'm merely the fuse. I must burn onward. I set out to bring down all of the enemies threatening this beautiful hunk of machinery, including a random big dude and the massively overrated #1 pilot in the arena. Maybe it's just the amount of AI-controlled pilots I've fought by now, but he really just didn't feel all that special. During this mission, I have infinite energy, meaning I can do this indefinitely. And finally, I have the only thing I needed to bring down an entire fleet. Bring it on, you floaty buggers! And as fun as that was, that, of course, wouldn't be the end of it. Good to see you again, Rusty. Unfortunately for him, I've still got infinite energy. I can dodge as many times as I want. Distance just isn't a problem. What is, though, as it turns out, is my ammo of all things. He's finally learned to avoid some more of the missiles, and I just didn't have enough to bring him down. On the first attempt, anyway. A quick swap of my gear was all it took to make the difference. I used some that tracked a fair bit better, and I still wasn't great on ammo, but he was even worse on health. Sorry, buddy. But the thing about bombs is that they're notoriously hard to contain. It's been a pleasure flying with you, but all good things must come to an end. We were fired at via satellite cannons, of course controlled by the voice in my head that mysteriously hasn't been in my head for the last section or so. To complete my mission, I'm gonna have to kill one of my closest companions. I did have to change my setup a bit. Fittingly in theme, I had to change to songbirds. Think of them like shotguns that go boom. I also finally changed out some more of my kit for higher energy defense. Her shield goes up pretty quickly after going down, so I had to be able to hit her with as much damage as I could. She didn't sit still often, but it was long enough to let off some grenades, and damn, they hit hard. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to effectively avoid her melee attacks while lugging around this much weight, but I kinda needed that much in weaponry to bring her down. That being said, survival is overrated. It's not about burning long. Low enough, just about anything can keep going for a long time, but that's not the point. In that moment, what mattered most was burning brightly. Burning hot. All that mattered was embodying the inferno, letting it consume the mind, body, soul. Something that even she would figure out before the end. Something that she would realize far too late. For all things, there is a beginning and an end. A universe created in a Big Bang, and a people ended in one. Though a darkness would overtake the light, with the fire's passing came a chance for something new. And for the blood I've shed, I can only hope that it's a chance they'll take. Regardless of what path they should choose, I hope you enjoyed your time here. You probably know how to use social media, and I hope that means I'll get to hear your thoughts now and on any future outings. A special thanks to my lovely channel members. I'm grateful to everyone who's so kind as to take the time to journey with me, but your generosity is a tremendous help in the day-to-day. To all of my traveling tubers, though, until the next time, remember to stay safe, spread some kindness in the world. And I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.